The real wealth is hidden in who you think you are. Most people will never become wealthy, and not for the reasons they think. It's not because of the economy. It's not because of a lack of intelligence, or talent, or time. It's not even because of fear. The real reason sits much deeper. It's so subtle, so embedded that it rarely gets spoken aloud, even by the most successful. But Napoleon Hill hinted at it again and again in his writings. He said, "The subconscious mind will not translate into reality a thought driven by fear." Read that again. The mind will not allow you to receive what your identity silently rejects. This is the millionaire identity shift no one talks about, because it's not found in the pages of strategy books or business plans. It doesn't live in how much you know, but in who you believe you are allowed to become. See, wealth isn't something you chase. It's something you receive when your internal identity is capable of holding it. You can force hustle, you can push discipline, you can grind 18 hours a day. But if, in your deepest emotional blueprint, you still see yourself as the version of you who struggles, who lacks, who is told to stay humble or not ask for too much, then your outer world will never outgrow your inner image, not for long. Wealth may visit you temporarily, but it will leave quietly, returning to the hands of someone who believes they were born to hold it. This is not about arrogance. This is not about affirmations or positive thinking. This is about identity, and identity is sacred. In the next few minutes, you're going to walk through a mirror, not the kind on your wall, the kind in your mind, the one that reflects not your face, but your fate. Because until you change who you are at the core, you will unconsciously repel everything you say you want. Let's begin with the first lie, the lie of becoming rich. Are you ready to confront the war inside? Excellent. Now we enter the first chamber of the transformation. This is where the internal war is exposed, between the self that desires wealth and the self still wired for lack. They tell you to become rich, as if wealth is a destination on a map, a treasure chest waiting at the end of some carefully planned route. They show you the tactic, the step-by-step, the funnels, the habits, and yes, all of that matters. But what no one says is this: you cannot become rich while still identifying as the person who isn't. It's not that the effort is wrong. It's that the energy is fractured. Let's pull back the curtain. Right now, there are two identities living inside you. The first is the seeker, the one watching this, the one craving growth, the one who dreams of building, expanding, rising. But the second? The second is the keeper of the past. It's the version of you who remembers being broke, who remembers being laughed at, who remembers how small you felt when you asked for more and were told you were being selfish, unrealistic, or arrogant. That version isn't evil. It was built to survive. It built armor to protect you from disappointment, from pain, from the shame of wanting. But that same armor, it's blocking everything you now say you're ready for. Here's the paradox. You say you want to become rich, but in saying that, you're reinforcing the identity of someone who is not. It's like standing outside a locked door and shouting for the key, when the door opens inward and the key has always been inside your own hand. You cannot walk into the next level of your life, dragging the ruins of your old identity behind you. And yet, that's what most people try to do. They want to think rich while still fearing judgment. They want to act rich while still obeying the emotional rules of poverty. They want to feel rich while still needing validation from people who never left the mental neighborhood. But here's the brutal truth. The version of you that becomes wealthy is not the version of you that seeks permission. Wealth requires a shift so deep, it severs ties with who you used to be, not in anger, but in reverence. Like a snake shedding its skin, like a phoenix burning the old feathers, like a warrior walking away from the battlefield of survival and into the stillness of dominion. You must stop trying to become rich and start asking, who must I no longer be to receive the wealth that already belongs to the version of me I've not yet met? Because make no mistake, the millionaire version of you, they already exist. In another timeline, another identity, another frequency, they are already making the decisions you feel. They are already walking with the posture you avoid. They are already speaking with the authority you hesitate to claim. Not because they're better, but because they let go of the identity that was never theirs to begin with. Understand this. You cannot build a palace on a foundation made of shame. You cannot write a new story using the alphabet of limitation. And you cannot carry the energy of lack into the chambers of abundance. The door will not open. Napoleon Hill called this the law of harmonious vibration. He taught that your mind must emotionally and energetically align with the reality you seek, or else you will unconsciously reject it, even when it stands right in front of you. This is why people sabotage opportunities. This is why sudden wealth evaporates. This is why some succeed temporarily, then fall back into old cycles. They're not bad. They're not broken. They're simply unresolved. And the unresolved self does not allow transformation, only temporary upgrades. Let that sit. If you're still trying to become rich from the position of someone who feels unworthy, unseen, or unloved, then all you're really doing is negotiating with your prison guard, asking for a nicer cell. But freedom doesn't ask. It doesn't beg. It doesn't try to prove. It simply walks quietly, powerfully through the fire, leaving the ashes, the old identity behind. You say you want to be rich, but are you willing to stop being poor? In your beliefs, in your boundaries, in your sense of self? This is the identity fracture. This is the war no one talks about. Not the war outside, but the war within. And the moment you stop fighting to keep the familiar, you'll begin rising into the inevitable. Because wealth was never something you had to chase. It was something you had to remember. Something you had to become worthy of, not by effort, but by embodiment. And that embodiment begins by exposing the shadow that's been spending your fortune before you ever earn it. Let's go there now. Now we descend deeper into the inner saboteur, the silent shadow that spends your wealth before it ever reaches your hands. There is a version of you that's afraid to be rich, not consciously, not on the surface, where your goals and affirmations live. But deep below, in the forgotten basement of your identity, there lives a shadow self who fears what wealth might cost you. And here's the paradox. That shadow self is not your enemy. It was born the moment you learned that being seen could be dangerous. It formed the first time you reached for something greater and were met with ridicule, punishment, or rejection. It is not evil. It is protective, but its protection is suffocating you. This is the part of you that says, what if I lose it all? What if I change and they stop loving me? What if wealth makes me arrogant, selfish, or alone? And here's the kicker. The shadow doesn't. It whispers. It sabotages with silence. It delays decision. It lowers your standards just enough so you can call it realistic. It talks you out of the very moves that would set you free, then justifies it with logic. You think you're being smart, but you're actually obeying the ghost of a younger self who was told not to ask for too much. Napoleon Hill understood this. He called it hypnotic rhythm, the unconscious groove of thought and behavior that keeps you locked in the same patterns year after year. It's why people will read all the right books, take all the right courses, and still nothing changes. Because identity always wins. And if your identity is wired to survive, not thrive, then even success will feel like a threat. That's why you'll unconsciously spend the fortune before you earn it. Not literally, but energetically. You'll waste your boldness second-guessing. You'll waste your intuition by deferring to the crowd. You'll waste your preparation by hiding when it's time to speak. Because something inside you still fears what wealth will expose. Will it make you a target? Will it make you responsible for others? Will it force you to leave people behind? The shadow answers all of these questions before you even ask them, and it answers in fear. So what do most people do? They build just enough success to feel in control, but never enough to feel truly free. Because full freedom would mean full visibility. And visibility terrifies the part of you that was built to be invisible. Let that sink in. There's a reason why generational poverty persists. It's not just financial, it's emotional. It's not just about lack of money. It's about loyalty to the past. And those loyalties run deep. You don't want to outgrow your family. You don't want to seem better than your peers. You don't want to become the one everyone talks about. Because you remember how they talked about others who tried to rise. So instead, you shrink, you dim, you delay, all in the name of being realistic. When in truth, you're just protecting a false identity from being rewritten. But here's the awakening. You're not a traitor for outgrowing your past. You're a leader. A new bloodline begins with you, not just in money, but in mindset, in emotional maturity, in spiritual sovereignty. And the shadow, it doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be seen, witnessed, integrated, Because when the subconscious feels safe, it stops sabotaging. When it feels aligned, it stops resisting. That's why your work isn't just external, it's internal alignment. You must teach your nervous system that abundance is safe. You must teach your inner child that visibility is not a threat. You must teach your shadow that you don't need to spend your wealth in self-protection anymore because you are no longer in danger. Wealth does not demand perfection, but it does require identity congruence. And that congruence begins when you stop running from your own shadow and begin walking with it, hand in hand, toward the light. Because here's what no one told you. The version of you that is wildly successful is not fearless. They just learned to move forward, even with the fear sitting beside them. They made peace with the parts of them that once felt unworthy. They rewrote the contract, not by erasing the past, but by giving it new meaning. The shadow was never your curse. It was your compass, pointing you to the part of yourself that needed love before it could hold power. And now, that part of you is ready to be seen. But first, you must understand the law, not a man, but of the subconscious, the silent architect of your reality. And that's exactly where we're headed next. Because wealth is not gained by accident. It is magnetized or repelled based on the identity you carry into every room, every deal, every decision. Let's decode those invisible laws now. Now we enter the chamber of hidden architecture, the silent laws governing identity and attraction. This is not about what you do, but who you are when you do it. There are laws more powerful than gravity, laws that move beneath your awareness, not written in books, but etched in the structure of reality itself. Napoleon Hill didn't just teach success, he decoded vibration. He mapped the spiritual mechanics of wealth long before manifestation became a buzzword. What Hill revealed, and few truly understood, was this: faith is the only known antidote to failure. But faith is not hope. It is not wishing. It is not belief without work. Faith, in Hill's code, is identity in action, a state of being so congruent, so definite, that the subconscious aligns reality to match it. Because here's the law no one teaches in school. You do not get what you want. You get what you are. Let that echo. Everything you attract is a reflection of the identity you currently embody. If you walk into a room uncertain of your value, even the highest paying clients will feel it. If you speak with hesitation, the universe will hesitate to deliver. If you build with the energy of desperation, you'll attract transactions, not transformation. Wealth is not a reward for effort. It is a mirror of alignment. That's why two people can use the same strategy. One ascends, the other stagnates. One carries the inner code of abundance, the other still runs on the software of lack. This is where Hill's trifecta becomes essential. Definiteness of purpose, faith, and auto-suggestion, not as practices, but as identity systems. Let's break it down. 1. Definiteness of purpose equals identity clarity. This isn't just about having goals. It's about being the kind of person who no longer needs to ask what comes next. They know their life moves in a straight line, not a circle. Why? Because their identity is welded to their purpose. They don't dabble, they declare. And that declaration shifts everything. You begin walking like the person who already owns the outcome, not pretending, not posturing, becoming. 2. Faith equals identity stability. In Hill's terms, faith is the emotionalized belief in a reality not yet seen. It's not passive. It's not fragile. It's a spiritual muscle built through repetition, grounded in vision, and activated in silence. The wealthy do not hope for results. They expect them, not with arrogance, but with certainty born from inner congruence. Because they are not trying to become rich. They already are internally, and the outer world is simply catching up. This is not delusion. It's alignment. You must learn to carry the vibration of the destination before the arrival. Otherwise, you'll sabotage it at the door. 3. Autosuggestion equals identity reprogramming. Most people read affirmations like poetry, but the true power lies in emotional repetition, speaking to your subconscious in its native language, feeling. Autosuggestion is the act of planting seeds in the soil of identity, day after day, until the harvest becomes inevitable. It is not about lying to yourself. It is about training yourself to remember what your highest self already knows. When you repeat, I am wealth, I am power, I am trusted with abundance, you're not just saying word, you're restoring your original code. Because somewhere along the way, life taught you to forget. It gave you names you didn't choose. It gave you limits you didn't earn. It gave you fears that never belonged to you. And now you're taking it all back by speaking into the mirror of your own mind and reclaiming what was never truly lost. This is the law. Identity first, then emotion, then reality. You think the world will reward you when you're finally ready. No, the world mirrors you when you are aligned because the subconscious doesn't respond to ambition. It responds to vibration. You must become the kind of person who is allowed to have what you say you want before it arrives. No more begging. No more bargaining. No more asking for permission to rise. You walk as if it's already yours, not because you're entitled, but because you're in integrity with the identity that earns it. The wealthy are not lucky. They are in resonance with the laws of self. They've stopped waiting for external validation and started sculpting inner congruence. This is the millionaire shift, not what you do, who you are when you do it. So when you enter that room, when you send that email, when you launch that idea, pause and ask, am I operating from fear or from the future version of me that already owns this reality? Because the moment you answer honestly and align accordingly, you begin attracting not just money, but your mirror. And that mirror will either reveal a lie or reflect a legacy. Now we turn toward that mirror. Not metaphorically, literally. It's about confrontation. You and the mirror, face to face. No masks, no noise, just truth. Let's go. We now arrive at the turning point, the ritual of reflection. No more theory, no more talking. This is the confrontation. You, the mirror, and the unspoken truth of who you refuse to become. Stand in front of the mirror, not just physically, but fully. No filters, no angles, no excuses. Look into your own eyes. Stay there, not for 5 seconds, not for one shallow breath. Stay until the surface shatters, because beneath the reflection is a truth you've been avoiding for years. You don't fear failure. You fear visibility. You fear what will be revealed if you win. You fear who you'll become if you no longer get to use struggle as your shield. You fear receiving because receiving is vulnerable, exposed, real. There's a difference between chasing wealth and being willing to hold it. That's why this ritual matters. It's not a performance. It's not positive thinking. It's a reckoning. Because in the mirror, you can't lie. Not to the part of you that remembers how you used to flinch when the rent was due. Not to the part of you that still hears the voice that said, people like us don't live like that. Not to the part of you that has worn poverty like a second skin. Not because you chose it, but because you inherited it. And now you're about to break the cycle. But first, you must break the contract. Here's how the ritual begins. You stand alone. No background music. No journal. No performance. You look into the eyes of the version of you that still lives in survival. And you speak, I release the identity of struggle. I release the need to earn love through suffering. I release the loyalty to being small so others can feel big. I release the fear of becoming more than I was told I could be. Say it again. Let your voice tremble. Let your knees shake. Let the old self protest. It will. Because this is a death of the familiar, a funeral for false humility, an ending for the part of you that believed playing small was noble. You will feel resistance. You may feel shame. You might even cry. Good. That means you've touched the wire. That means you're finally rewiring the part of your nervous system that once equated wealth with abandonment, or arrogance, or loss. But here's what's really happening. You're giving your subconscious permission to receive, not just money, power, peace, expansion, visibility. Because here's the secret. You cannot hold what you still judge if you secretly resent the wealthy. If you silently believe that rich means greedy, selfish, or corrupt. If you feel guilty when money flows to you with ease, then your mirror is fractured and your reflection will never match your desire. The mirror ritual repairs that fracture. It confronts the emotional contradiction head on. Because to truly evolve, you must let go of the self-image built in struggle and begin sculpting the self-image capable of sustaining sovereignty. This isn't about pretending. It's about remembering who you were before the programming, before the guilt, before the fear. Before you began shrinking to make others comfortable, you were not born to survive. You were born to build, to create, to command. And that begins here in silence and stillness in front of the mirror. Do this every day. No fanfare, No announcement, just you. Reclaiming your reflection. Look yourself in the eyes. Say your new name. Speak your new nature. Even if you don't believe it yet, speak it. Even if your voice shakes, speak it. Because every time you do, you strip power away from the past. You take one more step toward the version of you who has nothing to prove and everything to become. The millionaire identity is not born in noise. It is born in this moment, when the inner and outer selves finally align. And when they do, you stop chasing wealth and start holding it. Because the mirror no longer reflects who you were. It reveals who you've always been. And now that you've faced yourself, truly faced yourself, it's time to build that self into a fortress. Let's enter the code of construction. Now we begin the construction, not of wealth, but of the identity capable of holding it. This is where the abstract becomes architecture, where belief becomes blueprint. Imagine a sculptor standing in front of a block of stone. They don't panic, they don't rush. They see the figure already inside, and slowly, methodically, they chip away at what does not belong. This is how wealth is built. Not by adding more, but by removing what isn't you anymore. Because the millionaire self is not something you chase. It's something you uncover, something you engineer through identity, rhythm, and internal architecture. So let's get clear. You've looked in the mirror. You've confronted the shadows. Now comes the decision that changes everything. Will you live according to the old code, or will you write a new one? If you choose the latter, here's how you build. 1. Sculpt the self before you sculpt the strategy. Every tactic you try will fail if the self behind it is out of alignment. This means you don't start with, how do I make more money? You start with, who do I need to become to make money inevitable? What beliefs must die for wealth to feel safe in my hands? What habits match the identity of someone who commands millions, not in ego, but in certainty? Wealth follows the lead of identity, period. This is why affirmations don't work if they're spoken by a self that still feels small. The words say, I am wealthy, but the vibration says, I am scared, unworthy, and waiting to be chosen. You must reverse that current. Speak from the end. Move from the outcome. Decide now that your reality is simply catching up to your new identity, not proving it. The world cannot deny someone who already knows who they are. 2. Create the internal conditions for wealth to stay. Getting rich is one thing. Staying rich is another. Why? Because most people build wealth from hustle, but never build the emotional infrastructure to hold it. They build faster than they evolve. And when the money arrives, the nervous system panics. Suddenly, they feel exposed, unworthy, responsible for too much, afraid to lose it, and so they spend or sabotage or play small to avoid attention. That's why your new identity must include emotional capacity. Can you hold success without crumbling under the pressure? Energetic boundaries. Can you say no without guilt? Self-trust. Can you move without validation or applause? You don't just build the business. You build the internal throne that can carry the weight of your kingdom. You stop outsourcing power. You stop asking, is this okay? You begin operating like a sovereign, because wealth isn't just money. It's the energy of ownership. 3. Embody the rituals of the future. You now ask yourself, if I were already that person, how would I walk today? How would I speak, eat, move, decide? What would I stop explaining, justifying, or defending? Then do that. Not later. Not when it's convenient. Now, millionaire identity is not some future achievement. It's a daily discipline of being. That includes morning rituals that align you to power stillness before strategy, investing in decisions that stretch, not shrink, your identity operating from purpose, not panic. Every action becomes a vote for your new self. Every moment, an altar. Because you are not waiting for wealth. You are preparing a home for it. 4. Design environments that protect your becoming. Even the strongest self will collapse in the wrong atmosphere. You must curate your inputs like your life depends on it, because it does. This means conversations that challenge, not coddle media that nourishes, not numb spaces that feel like the future, not the past. If your environment reinforces the old you, your transformation will always be temporary. But when your surroundings reflect your new identity, even in subtle ways, they hold you accountable to your next level. Change the room, change the rhythm, change the rules. The future self cannot be built in yesterday's temple. 5. Protect the identity in silence. not performance, you are not required to explain your evolution. Let them misunderstand. Let them question. Let them talk. The new self is not here to be liked. It is here to be liberated. And real transformation is quiet. It's done in the early mornings, the lonely nights, the moments where you choose self-respect over familiar validation. When you no longer need the applause. When you stop asking for proof, you become dangerous to limitation, to poverty, to every version of you that thought success was only for them. This is the code of the new self. Move first, trust fully, own completely, because the wealthiest version of you isn't loud. They are clear. They don't try to prove, they demonstrate. They don't ask for permission, they walk with precision. And now that you've seen what's possible, it's time to leave behind the scaffolding and become the structure, not in noise, not in spectacle, but in the quiet walk away from who you were into who you've always been becoming. Let's close it. We now arrive at the final chamber, not a climax, but a crossing, where wealth stops being something you talk about and becomes something you carry. Now writing. Target 500 to 700 words. Minimum 4,000 characters will ensure target is met before proceeding. No celebration, no trumpet, no crowd, just you. In a quiet room you've never entered before. There is no door, no applause, no one waiting to say you've made it, because legacy doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives when you realize you stopped waiting for someone to tell you it's real. The shift already happened. You're just feeling its echo now. This is what no one talks about. The moment wealth becomes inevitable is the moment you realize you no longer need it to prove anything. You are already home. Not because of what's in your account, but because of who you become, unshakable, certain, calm. That's the real millionaire shift. It's not when the wire hits your bank. It's when the war in your mind goes silent. When you wake up and no longer negotiate with fear. When you enter a room and no longer wonder if you belong. When you walk through life not trying to win, but knowing you're already chosen. Read that again. There will be no fire, no massive aha moment. Just a sacred stillness, as if the world finally exhaled and let you take up your rightful space. You'll realize you stopped rushing, stopped begging, stopped proving, and you started creating. That's legacy. That's identity. And it only happens when the old self is no longer steering. You don't post about it. You don't explain it. You just live it. In your posture, in your presence, in your quiet precision. Some people will notice, some won't. That's not your concern anymore. Because the millionaire identity isn't for display. It's for dominion, for destiny, for impact so deep, the world feels it, even if it can't name it. So when you feel that stillness, when the anxiety dissolves, when the need to be seen fades, when the self-doubt vanishes like fog at sunrise, don't rush to fill the silence. Let it hold you. Because that silence, that's the signal. You've crossed from fear to ownership, from needing to embodying, from chasing to calling. This is not the end. It is the beginning of the version of you that does not need to burn out to be worthy, who no longer spends energy apologizing for success, who no longer contorts to stay acceptable. You don't just carry money now, you carry meaning, and that cannot be stolen. It cannot be faked. It cannot be revoked. This is who you've always been. It just took silence for you to remember. So walk now. No speech, no fanfare, just presence. Because when the identity is true, wealth follows like a shadow. And this time, it's not leaving. You've carried the code all along. Now you have the key, use it.